Hi, everybody. Hi,
Hi, Chris.
Steve. Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
This this is season 2, episode 5 of Talking Threadheads. And by the way, Nicole, I didn't tell you the news that we were renewed for a 3rd season already.
Sorry,
So
you said 33rd season?
33rd, yeah, we're
33rd and a third.
We're gonna try and beat 60 Minutes and whatever those long-running shows
Captain
are.
Kangaroo, I think.
Captain Kangaroo, yeah. If we can beat Captain Kangaroo. So anyway, we are welcoming Steve Hochman, who, Nicole, you don't know this, but Steve is my neighbor. Steve lives just a few blocks. We live a few blocks from each other here in Santa Monica. And I'm going to stop talking in a second, but we run into each other at the supermarkets, usually Bob's or Gelson's, or sometimes I see you guys walking on the street. But I don't think we've actually socialized because of COVID.
Well, yeah, that's limited.
Yeah, it's limited.
That quite a bit.
Anyway, Steve is a wonderful human being, but he's also a music writer, music critic, music reviewer. I think that's, you're bacon wrapped on the Jazz Fest chat board.
Well, yeah, if I'm ever on the Jazz Fest chat board anymore since Facebook, not really so much.
Right, but, that is true.
But yeah, and as far as the journalism part, I do write for Offbeat, so that is pertinent there.
I totally forgot about that, so thank you for bringing that up. And you were long time with the Los Angeles Times for 20 years, 25 years?
Yeah, from 1985 to, it's kind of vague as to when you would call when it ended, but maybe about 22 years or so.
Yeah. Got it. A nice run. So Nicole, one more thing, and then I promise I will shut up, is that I knew of Steve before I met Steve because I used to read him in the Los Angeles Times as a music critic. So I'd see a concert, I'd go to a concert and then I'd read about the same concert I went to when Steve would write a review. So it was
and you'd be going like, I don't know which concert you were at, but it wasn't the one I saw.
I don't think I ever said that to you. No. I would have sent it to Robert Hilburn, but not to you. All right. Now I'm going to officially shut up. Nicole, it's all you.
Well, I have 2 things I would like to say before we get into things. Number one, the viewers at home won't be able to appreciate this, but when you said that you were neighbors, I assumed you meant like maybe living in the same, like I don't know, maybe with the same interior designers, because I can see that your wall colors are basically the same. So I don't think anybody who's viewing is going to be able to see that. But
I promise you, we're not in the same house.
No, I was
yeah, we are not in the same house.
Yeah, it's like maybe they're just like, I don't know, bunking.
Santa Monica has very strict rules about interior design. Very strict rules.
I'm so glad you're in compliance. And then secondly, you just described sort of like I don't know, sometimes a dream scenario where like I've experienced that, where I've gone to an event, a show, a concert, and then I've loved it, right, or disliked it, and over the next day you check to see what the critics and other what writers have said, and I'll like vehemently disagree with what they've said, and I'm like, I need to share a piece of my mind with you, and it never happens. So I'm glad that you have that relationship. All right. Anyhow, you're here to talk about Jazz Fest, right? So tell us when you began going to Jazz Fest and what brought you there.
Well, the first one I went to was in 91, and I've been to every one since. What got me there was, now I had been to New Orleans once before I think it was 88 for a family reunion, because I actually have some family down there who I didn't really know at the time, but they hosted our family reunion, my father's side of the family, and but I didn't really get to experience New Orleans on that trip. It really stayed at, I think it was the Sheraton or something, and had events planned out for family stuff, and didn't really get, my parents and I rode the streetcar, but that was about it. So I hadn't really gotten to know New Orleans at all. But in the fall of '90, my now late prior wife, Mary, and I got together. And she had already planned at the end of the year to go to New Orleans for a couple of days with some friends for New Year's. And she didn't drink at all. So her friends, they'd be in a bar and they'd all be like, or a club, and they'll be partying. And she got on the phone, found a payphones, and called me and said, "I love it here. We have to come here together sometime." And I said, "Well, my friend Nancy Covey, who used to run the concerts at McCabe's and was married to Richard Thompson, no longer is, but was. Her business was to run. She did tours around music festivals, and one of the main ones she did was around Jazz Fest. That would, in between the weekends, go out to Cajun country and have a big crawfish boil at the Mark and Anne Savoy family home, and all that." And I said, I'd been on a tour to England, the British Isles, with her before, and I said, "Let's go on Nancy's tour to Jazz Fest." And Mary said, "That sounds great." And so I called Nancy and said, "You got room this year?" She said, "No problem." And we went. And kind of what happened was, especially in the middle of the Cajun tour part, we were thinking, this is really great. We should do this again next year, but there's so many other places that we want to go that we'll just do it next year. And then after that, we'll travel to Europe. We'll do other stuff with our vacation time. And we got there the next year, and I think we were probably dancing under the oak tree at Mark and Anne Savoy's house to their live Cajun music while the crawfish was getting prepared. And we said, "Let's never not do this again for the rest of our lives." and in fact, 3 years after that, in 1995, we got married under that oak tree during the crawfish boil at Mark and Anne's house. But so that was how that happened. And then just not to go too deep into stuff, in the late 90s, Mary got the gig of writing the Frommer's Guide to New Orleans. And so that even deepened our relationship with the city, because we were there a lot. And then in 2003, partnering with a couple friends, we bought a house in Bayou St. John, walking distance from Jazz Fest. And Mary passed away in 2010, but my partners and I, and my now wife, Susan Hayden, own the house still. And so that, part of the community, really, really part of it. Don't get to spend as much time there as I want. They'll go in next week. We're going next week.
Oh, cool. Very cool. So if you had to think back, you started going in 1991. If you had to think back and you could pick, I know it's hard to do this, but if you could pick 2 or 3 standout performances from Jazz Fest, what would they be?
You know what? I anticipated this question. Maybe because you tipped me off.
Because it's on here.
Maybe because you tipped me off to it. Yeah. And I thought about a couple things here, and a few stood out. One was we became very big Klezmer All-Star fans then, but I remember seeing them in the kids' tent, maybe the second or third year we went, and there were like 50 people in there, and they had us all doing the hora in the kids' tent, and it was hilarious. And that was great. There was this performance, I don't remember exactly what year, but it was in that time, of Ry Cooder and Ali Farka-Touré, the Malian guitarist. And they had done a little preview showcase thing at Howlin' Wolf. There was sort of an invite-only thing, and being in the music business, I got invited to that, and that was great. But seeing them out at the festival was amazing. I remember seeing R.L. Burnside there once. That was fantastic. We were very impressed early on. I remember Kermit also being somebody who really got our attention in the very first one we went to. And it was when he'd broken away from Rebirth and was doing his own stuff, and was more sort of his Louis Armstrong kind of vibe thing. And we loved that. And then I remember, and I wish I knew the name of the guy. And this kind of speaks to me as what Jazz Fest used to be more so. And then kind of got taken over by Ponderosa Stomp when Jazz Fest evolved over the years. And I don't know the guy's name. He was an older guy. He was from Mississippi, a white guy playing kind of a swamp rockabilly with electric guitar and a couple effects pedals. And it was a little wild and it was great. And he was in a tent, one of the tents, it was a smaller tent, but I don't even remember which tent it was. And we're just like standing there going like, this is great. We wouldn't see this anywhere else. It's like he had never played more than like 100 miles from his home kind of thing. And, I really wish I knew. Someday I'll do some research. I'll go back on the old grids and see.
Yeah, we're gonna have to put that in the show notes. So you're gonna have to look that up later after we stop recording.
And then I'll add any Mardi Gras Indians, any brass band, all of that was from the very beginning. That was so much what it was about. Just these, we'd walk to the music, but the music would walk by us too. So it was just fantastic.
I really liked to take this back for a moment when you were discussing how you and your late wife decided to always go to Jazz Fest. And I'm going to adopt that framework because it will save me so much anxiety, unnecessary anxiety every year, because every year I'm like, this is a beautiful world and I should be going to other places. And I do, right? I do. But every year it's like, is this the year I'm not going to do Jazz Fest?
Right.
Why on earth do I even entertain that possibility? Right. So from here on out, I'm gonna adopt that framework. Let's never not do this. So you already spoke a bit to this, but what else has changed about Jazz Fest since you began attending?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one of those who decries what Jazz Fest has become, because it's still like one of the greatest things you can do in the world. And the change was inevitable. It had to happen for it to survive. I mean, we saw that. There was those after that year when the whole a whole day got rained out, and when I came in, it was this sort of the early part of what was the rise of a certain I guess we baby boomers and some younger people going to Jazz Fest and going to it and making a thing, and then people's lives changed and they peeled away. More some of the younger people had families and mortgages and things, they couldn't get away every year, and it was financially disastrous for Jazz Fest, and the competition that came in the Jazz Fest helped stimulate, which made it harder and harder for people to dedicate their discretionary funds to that every year. So when AEG came in and joined in on the booking, it was necessary for the survival. So I'm not one of those who says, oh, it's not the same anymore. You can't, blah, 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 this and that. But the intensity of the crowds did become more of a problem for us. For me, definitely there's that. I tend to not pay, I don't really care about the big name headliners so much, with exceptions. There's some that I, will do anything I can to go see. But for the most part, I pay attention to what's going on the smaller stages and on the more specialty kind of stuff. And a lot of it's for the discovery value of it. Somebody I may have heard of but not seen, or somebody I maybe never even heard of and just can wander by and catch something. So that experience hasn't changed that much for me. Other than maybe there aren't those, whoever they were, rockabilly swamp guys from Mississippi playing, but there's still a lot that happens that, I just, cherish that opportunity to see them. So in that regard, I don't think, in terms of the experience, it's just maybe more people, and that's really the main difference. I mean, yeah, it's more commercial. It's more like a regular festival than the funkier thing that it used to be, but it's still pretty funky.
Indeed, it is. As a journalist and a reporter, you've also been an interviewer at the Allison Minor stage in the grandstand. What interviews stand out for you?
I'm trying to think how many I've done, maybe a dozen or something, maybe more. There are a few that really do stick out. I mean, Angelique Kidjo was incredible to talk to. And I'd interviewed her a little bit before on the phone once or twice. But I never really had that kind of session with her. And just, yeah, I mean, anytime I've done the interviews, it's like just sitting 3 feet from this person. And sometimes, you know, especially when they do some music, it's like, wow. And she didn't want to perform per se for that one. So we used recordings of her, some of her current work to illustrate the discussion. But I did coax her into doing 1 or 2 a cappella things just to show how she approached stuff. And I was just like, ugh. But she is so sharp and opinionated and committed. And, you know, interviewing her is really something special. And doing that in front of an audience was just great. The very first one I did was Nickel Creek, which was great too. So there I am, you know, sitting with Chris Thiele and Sarah and Sean Watkins, and they did, you know, they played some songs, and that was really great. You know, Chris, you'll be angry at me if I didn't mention the 9 Lives one, which was also really spectacular, which was Paul Sanchez and Coleman Decay and Dan Baum talking about how that came about. And I did do one another year with just Paul, which was fantastic as well. And you know, Paul has meant a lot to me in my life. He's been a great friend. I'm going to mention a couple others that really stand out. John Schofield, the jazz guitarist, when he had done his gospel album, and he sat there with his guitar, just no band, and just played some. And that was, again, it was like, yeah, that's incredible. I had the same thing the last Jazz Fest with Jerry Douglas, the dobro player, where he just came up with his dobro, and I'm like, yeah, I play guitar, and I look at this thing, I go like, I have no idea how you work that thing. What do you do? How do you make those sounds out of that? It's incredible. And then the other one I'll mention was one that's like way off, kind of off the board, which was the First Nations group from I can't now. Why am I forgetting which part of Canada they're from? But a tribe called Red, who are more of a electronica, hip hop sampling thing, which is quite a phenomenon in the Canadian First Nations world. These sort of like powwow raves, but they worked in so much social commentary about the treatment of their people and of others around the world, and did it with such craft, and it was very controversial. They came back again the next year or a couple of years later, and they were target of a lot of I mean, not directly to them, but a lot of in chatter about Jazz Fest, a lot of abuse about what are they doing here? This doesn't belong at Jazz Fest. This is, you know, they're playing on a computer. They're this and that. But I thought it was stunning, and them showing again on in the interview how they put these things together. You know, like, well, we take this element, we do this, and just sort of explaining it all. I remember dragging David Frick from Rolling Stone writer over to see. I'm recommending them to see them over at. They played early in the day on Gentilly, and he just had this look on his face like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen, and he became a big supporter and fan of theirs as well.
Very nice.
Yeah, as a person who cares about the direction the festival goes in and understands that, you know, as you said, the involvement of AAG is a necessity in order for the festival to continue on. I mean, in order to keep me, you know, my curiosity and my thirst and interest in hearing new things alive and, you know, stated by going to fest, I want to hear groups like A Tribe Called Red, you know, and not all music has to be for me, right? At all. So, you know, to me, it's important, and it makes me feel happy to support a festival that, you know, includes space for groups like that, even when there's some chatter about, hey, this doesn't belong here. Well,
Right.
who are you to gatekeep, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, it's like complaining about something that's on TV. Change the channel.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there aren't, you know, 9, 10 other stages you can go to and see what's happening there. What difference does it make?
Absolutely. Sometimes you just need to
yeah.
mind your own business and go listen to something else, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like complaining about, you know, I don't like X kind of food. Why do they have that at Jazz Fest?
Yeah. Get over it.
Yeah.
So it's been since 2019, obviously,
Mhm.
since anyone's been to the fest. What is the one thing, just one, that you miss the most?
One thing I miss the most. Well, honestly, it's that spontaneous running into people
Mhm.
on the grounds. You know, just crossing, you know, from, you know, one thing to another, and there's somebody else, and you're going like, you know, some friend or somebody maybe I hadn't seen since the last year or whatever, and it's like, great talking to you. Now I'm off to this. Where are you going? I'm going there. Oh shoot, I wanted to see that. You know, I'll catch 5 minutes of this, and then I'll see you over there. And that's, to me, that's the real Jazz Fest experience. And on almost a related note, I used to love, I still do, finding there's one spot, and it's usually like around the flagpole, where you can, if the wind is going the right, you can hear like 5 or 6 different things at once, and smell, you know, maybe a dozen different foods at once. And I just love doing that. Just, you know, standing there for like 5 minutes and taking in whatever is happening. So I miss those things.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember when I met you, and I think it was in the early 2000s at Ponderosa Stomp.
Probably.
I think I talked to you and Mary there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I knew who you were when you said your name. Then it.
Right, and I knew who you are from the fest board.
So, but how did you get involved with the Threadheads?
Right. I think it was 2008, I'm going to say, when I was writing some for Grammy.com, the online presence of the Recording Academy. And the editor there at the time wanted to do a sort of regular coverage of innovative record labels. Because it was a time of great transition in the music business, of the big labels were not having the same kind of impact. A lot of artists were getting squeezed out, and a lot of people were trying to figure out new ways to do it. And also with, you know, digital and downloading and everything, it was you know, there was a lot of room for new approaches. And I was aware of Threadhead from, you know, being on the board. You know, I wanted the board mostly to find out, you know, what speculation about acts and things like that, and of course, but also just about New Orleans stuff. And so of course I became aware of Threadhead Records as an entity then. And you only had a couple things out at that point. Whenever it was I did it, you only had a couple things out.
Yeah.
But the concept, you know, and it was before GoFundMe and all that, the concept of what we came to call crowdfunding, even though it's a very focused kind of it, of doing it, was really intriguing. And I pitched the story to the editor, and he said, "Oh, that sounds great." And so I reached out to you, Chris, and normally I wasn't able to go. You know, that year the Patry was an option for me, because usually that day was the crawfish boil out at the Savoys that I go to, but they actually had it a different day that year, or maybe that was a year they took off. I can't remember. So I was able to go to the Patry, and you know, I think I'd already talked to you on the phone probably for background and everything. At the Patry, I remember talking to Susan Cowsill, who I'd been friends with already, and I did know Paul as well, and I sat down there and talked with John Boutte, about their record and about the whole approach to it, why they, how they came about to do this, and did the story. And I thought it was really good. I thought it was a good piece about.
It was a good piece, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I thought it, sort of shared your mission really well, and the philosophy of it. And I was into it. I thought it was great, and being, wanting to be involved in the New Orleans community aspect of it. I don't remember how long it was after that I remember having a conversation with you, Chris, and just saying, I'm not trying to embarrass you about this or anything. I said, so, because more stuff was getting funded, and it was like sort of really building up steam. And I said, so how do you decide which ones you're going to do? And you said, well, basically they send in applications and I say yes. And I said, I don't think I said, that doesn't sound good. But I think I must have said something, indication, and I said, I think I did something to question whether that was really an effective way of
it was the kiss of death for Threadhead Records, because Offbeat also quoted me on that. And and then every musician, because I didn't quote you on it. Oh, well, Offbeat did, yeah, and and it was something to the effect, we never turn anyone down.
Yeah, and I think what happened, that must have gotten you thinking, because I remember then you called me and said, I'd like you to be involved with Threadhead Records, and I have some ideas, and let's have lunch. And I remember we went to like a vegetarian place on Melrose, and and you sat down and you explained the way you wanted to do was put together, basically, for lack of a better term, let's call it an A&R committee of a few people who would be involved in screening projects based on their potential, on whether they fit the mission of Threadhead Records, and whether they had enough potential to raise the funds to move forward, and in theory enough potential to
right,
be able to reimburse on that, which is a whole other issue. But and I said, sure, let's do it. So I became, we never even had a name for the committee, or it wasn't like the, or at least I never heard one, if you had a name for it.
That was just more of an advisory council or whatever.
And I took an active role in that. I became I don't remember how many, but I would be you'd forward on things and say, does this interest you? And I'd look at it and say, yeah, this does. I'll be the liaison for it. So I would become the person who would contact the applicant, the artist, and try to sort out what their needs were, what the details of it were, and make sure that they understood what we were doing and how it worked, and make sure that we understood what their intents were. And a few pretty good projects came out of that, I think. I don't think any of them recouped, but I know Sophie Lee was one. Remember that?
You and I had totally forgotten about this, so I appreciate you bringing it up. You and I worked on, God, I haven't thought about this in years. You and I worked on the Joel Sanier, however you pronounce it.
The Joel Sanier one. Yeah. You and I think, were the funding for that. You mostly, and me with kicking in what I felt I could at the time. And that was with John Shalhoub, who had come to it. This was an oddball one, so just to go back a little bit. And it's also oddball in that it never got released.
So Nicole, I don't know if you know, I didn't really know much about John Shalhoub. He wound up living in New Orleans, and I think he passed away in New Orleans 4 or 5 years ago, whatever.
Yeah. Longer than that now,
longer. He was a music producer, and he produced one of my all-time favorite albums, John Hyatt, Bring the Family, which is just an incredible album. And
he produced the Blind Boys Alabama Grammy-winning albums, and a whole bunch of really, really interesting works.
So when he expressed interest in some crowdfunding and Threadhead Records, I was like, this is great.
Yeah, he was a friend. He'd actually,
Yeah.
he then, after the woman I'd mentioned earlier, Nancy Covey, he took over as the concert booker at McCabe's, which is how I first got to know him. And he'd call me. We were in touch a lot, and he called me on this one and said, what do you think? He said, I know you're involved with Threadhead. What do you think about this? Joel Saunier, who's a great Cajun accordionist. And John had this idea for a record of putting together like this all-star band. For them was George Porter Jr., Johnny Vodakovich, and Sonny Landreth to back him. And John was going to pick out the songs, and they weren't Cajun songs. There was like a Nick Lowe song, and I don't even remember what else was on it. I said, God, it could be interesting. And so Chris and I together said, all right, this is a different profile for Threadhead. Let's see what we can do with it. And
those recordings are somewhere.
I have them.
You have a while.
I have copies of them. I don't have the masters. Joel has the masters.
All right. Offline, you're going to have to send me those.
Okay.
I haven't listened to those in years and years and years.
Okay. The last time I listened to them, I thought they held up really well.
Wow.
I still question some of the elements of the concept, that it wasn't, and this is why it didn't get released in part, is because I think when Joel and his wife listened back to it, they thought that it wasn't, it was so off the track of what they normally did that his fans maybe wouldn't get it.
Right. It wasn't his brand.
Yeah. I do have a funny anecdote about I when they were doing the recordings at Piety Street. I went for one day, and I think this was like at the end of Jazz Fest that year, whatever year it was, and I go in and they're working, they're working up how they're going to do something, and then they did it, and John Shalou and I are in the booth with the engineer and in the control room, and something happened, and I made some comment to John about, what if they tried this? And I wasn't like trying to like intrude or be a producer. I said, oh, that's kind of interesting. That might work. And he calls them all in, and they walk in. None of them had they'd never met me. They didn't know who I was. And John says, Steve has this idea. And I don't know how you are with profanity on this, so I'll
go for it.
Go for it. Okay.
We encourage it.
And George Porter Jr. is standing there, looks at me, looks at John and says, who the fuck is he? And John said, I'm thinking like, what else is George Porter Jr. going to say in a moment like this? Who's this little twerp to tell us, make any suggestion to us? But I do remember that John said, no, listen to what he said. I like tried not to be too shaky and intimidated. And whatever it was I said, it wasn't any huge, thing. I said it, and they went, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Maybe I'll title this episode, Who the Fuck Is He?
Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. I like that. Who the fuck is he?
My memoir,
yeah. So, I was going to rephrase this question now just to keep the profanity flowing. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, who the fuck are some of your recommendations to see at Jazz Fest? But let's not. Let's soften the edges a little. Okay. But no, tell us. We have a lineup. We have a daily lineup, which is exciting. Mm-hmm. Give us some recommendations. Okay. Who should we see at the fairgrounds?
And I have to preface this. Well, first of all, I'm going to say I'm going to pretend like this is all spontaneous, just off the top of my head. But again, it was on that list. Mm-hmm. I'm focusing on the first weekend because I'm not going to be able to be there for the second weekend. Prior commitment back here in LA. So sadly, going to do that. But I can live with it. I'm happy to be there this year at all. So I'm focusing on the first weekend. And here's the list I put together looking at the rosters. I'm going to start with one that I remember the first year he played, and there were a handful of people in the blues tent at the start of his set, and it just grew and grew and grew. And then the next time he played, it was packed before he even went on, and that's Bombino, the Niger Tuareg guitarist, who was just incredible. I already knew about him. I was telling people about him before. I think I'd even seen him once before. And so, I highly recommend that to anybody who, whether you know him or you don't know him, go see him. This is this crazy, wild West African electric guitar, just nuts stuff. It's great. And then the rest of the ones I'm going to mention are all local Louisiana, most New Orleans, Louisiana acts. And ones that most of them I have some personal connection with or deep personal connection with, and I've interviewed all of them. Layla McCullough.
Yeah, she's great.
Her latest project, if you don't know it, which I did write about in Offbeat, an interview with her, was this a one woman, not one woman, but a stage show production about her that had to do with, she's a Haitian American, with her Haitian roots and it's the story of a Haitian Creole radio station that was under fire a lot from the government there. And it was turned in, she and some collaborators turned it into this really great stage show. So I'm sure some part of that will be in her set here. In fact, her new album coming out is music from that, and it's really, really good.
When does the album come out?
The album comes out, I can't remember if it comes out before or after Jazz Fest. Are you gonna Google it?
I will.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's late April. I think it's right around Jazz Fest.
Her last album, which was 3 or 4 years ago, was just fabulous.
The one that the King James that produced. Capitalist Blues.
I don't know who the producer is.
Capitalist Blues, yeah.
Yes, Capitalist Blues.
Yeah, Jim.
I listen to that all the time.
Yeah.
According to this, her new album will be released on May 6th.
May 6th, so right in the middle of Fest, yeah. I'm looking forward to see some really dear old friends, Paul and the Road Show, and of course the Spencer tribute that many of those people are involved in. Dana Kurtz, who's doing both her duo with Robert Maché and then also their band Lulu and the Broadsides. They're going to be performing, and so I'm excited about that. I'm always excited to see Tank and the Bangas if they're not too big for us now. For a number of reasons, the Savoy family band, which they come down from Eunice, and also their Wilson Savoy's band, the Pine Leaf Boys. This is some of the best Cajun music you'll ever see anywhere. And then another one I did an Offbeat story on recently, and who has been my I've interviewed him maybe 4 or 5 times, and he's consistently among the most exciting interviews I've ever done, is Terrence Blanchard. And his newest project that he's going to be showcasing here, and he did do his opera, was of course staged at the New York Met, and became the first opera by an African-American composer, by a Black composer, ever to be staged at the New York Met in its something like 136-year history. So that was big. But his latest album is called Absence, that he did with his band, the E Collective, and the Turtle Island String Quartet. And it's an homage to Wayne Shorter. And it's really, really great. And so I'm looking, I was excited because it was booked before to do, it was booked last year to do this with, to do showcasing that album. But the Turtle Island String Quartet's going to be part of the show too. So, so those are my top recommendations on my relatively quick scan of it. I mean, again, I'll go with, any Mardi Gras Indian troupe, go see them. Just about any brass band. There's less international music on this year than I've become accustomed to, and I'm sure that a lot of that has to do with COVID travel restrictions.
I'm sure, yeah.
And also just, I mean, in recent years, even just the visa issues during the Trump years, the visa restrictions made it much harder for people to travel too. So that was a problem as well. So it's been very difficult to get some of the African and South American acts that had been, standard on Jazz Fest, but there are a few still. Like I said, Bombino's coming in. There are a few others that I'm going to try to check out in that regard as well. So, but I do miss that. I'm sorry, there's no international emphasis or honored nation this year on a culture.
I do have a lightning round question that we didn't tip you off to. And then we actually have to wrap it up because we do have another recording coming up here in about 15 minutes. So you have to only pick one. You can't hem and haw here and come up with 3 or 4. Favorite Jazz Fest food?
Oh, well, that's the cochon de lait. Oh boy. And I don't have to hem and haw about that. It was only a quick choice whether that or the soft shell crab, oh boy. But for a variety of reasons, the cochon de lait gets my.
And is that something you buy every day you're out there, or is it?
No, I can't do that. There are too many other things to try. But I'll have it a few times, and we at our house we sometimes have if we don't have other dinner plans, we'll have what we call Jazz Fest potluck, and so everybody, without even usually consulting on what they're getting, get some stuff that we can pack up, take up, and those are always they'll wrap them up for you, and they travel nicely. So
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
I will see you around the neighborhood.
Yep.
I'm sure very soon.
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about the proposed development at the Gelson's lot and trying to stop it.
Yes, we are.
Yep.
I'm donning my opposition hat, and we will talk about that. All right, I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. I'm going to hit stop recording here. Hang on.
Okay.